So what vegetable seeds can you sow in June? Well, the good news is when we get to June, the temperature is starting to get much warmer now, and therefore the opportunity for sowing seeds, particularly outdoors, significantly increases. And June is a wonderful month where there's so many different choices of vegetable seeds that you might decide to sow. And in this video, I'll be showing you 10 vegetables that I'll be sowing in June to give you 1 or 2 suggestions for yourself. I'll also be sharing my favourite varieties. Now, when I'm deciding what vegetables I'm going to sow and when, I always refer to my vegetable sowing and planting calendar, which you would have seen in previous videos. It's a really simple spreadsheet that I've created that has all the vegetables down the left-hand side with the varieties, and then I can look on a month-by-month basis when to sow indoors, when to sow outdoors, when to plant out and when to harvest. And if you do want a free copy of the calendar, I'll provide details at the end of the video to show you how to get one. It is worth mentioning that because of different climates, different growing zones, you will need to check your sowing and growing dates in your local area. I'm based right in the centre of the UK, and for the purposes of growing zones, that's growing zone number 8. So if you are in different growing zones, you might need to make some slight adjustments to some of the sowing and planting dates that you'll find in my planting calendar. Now, as I produce these seed vegetable growing videos every single month, you will find a video on my channel which I published last month which shows you seeds that you can sow in May, and a lot of those seeds in that video are still applicable to June, so you can watch that video. I'll put a link to that video in the video description below so you can check that out as well. So for the purposes of this video, I've tried to select different vegetables that appeared in that May video just to give you more ideas. So if you watch the May video and this video, it's going to give you a fantastic variety of vegetables that you can sow in June. Now, my first suggestion may well surprise you for a vegetable you can sow in June, and that is cucumbers. A lot of people think cucumbers need to be sown really early, and if you're starting them indoors like I have with these ones here, these were sown around about late March, and I've been growing these indoors. But as you can imagine, because it was March and then into April, the temperatures just weren't warm enough for me to grow these outdoors. But in June, you can plant cucumbers directly in the ground outside. Now, typically these will need around about 18 to 20 degrees centigrade soil temperature in order to germinate, and they're achievable temperatures in the month of June, particularly as you get towards the end of June. So these can be planted directly outside all the way through June. After we get to June, particularly in the UK, it gets a little bit late. But if you started cucumbers indoors and for whatever reason they haven't been successful, it's not too late to now start some cucumbers outside. If you are going to plant them outside, make sure you prepare the ground well, have some good organic fertile soil or compost, and plant them at a depth of about 1.5 to 2 centimetres, that's 15 to 20 millimetres deep, and then cover them with compost and give them a good water. A good tip for planting cucumbers directly outside is to plant 2 seeds together, and by doing that you're increasing your chances of germination. If both of the seeds do grow, you can loosely separate them out, but cucumbers don't really like to be moved very much, so if you have got a lot of cucumbers, it might be worthwhile just nipping one of them off and just picking the strongest one. Now, these are a variety called Marketmore 76. They're an outdoor variety of ridge cucumbers, and you will need to ensure that you select an appropriate outdoor variety. Ridge cucumbers are fantastic. They're not normally as large as the cucumbers you'd find in a greenhouse or a polytunnel, but these are fantastic smaller cucumbers, and the amount of cucumbers I get off these every single year is absolutely fantastic. Now, these ones here, because I've started them indoors, I'm going to be transplanting these now into larger pots and training them up canes. I always think it's best to train the cucumbers up canes and tie them rather than let them grow and sprawl along the ground, and that's for a number of reasons. The first reason, if you do that, it takes up an awful lot of space because these will go everywhere all over your plot, and of course if they're off the ground it also takes them away for pests such as slugs that also like cucumbers. So my first suggestion for a vegetable to sow in June is cucumbers. Now, fantastic veg that's great for growing for most months of the year, right through from February to September, October, is radishes, and this is one of the easiest vegetables to grow. I often get questions from new growers about what are the easiest vegetables to grow, and radishes is definitely one of them. And this is also a fantastic vegetable to sow in June. Now, the great news about radish is that they grow really quickly, so you could plant these and within 6 to 8 weeks you can have a harvest. Now, these are always best sown directly outdoors. I have tried them in cell trays before and they just don't work, because what you want to do is plant the seeds in the position where they're going to grow and where you're going to harvest them. So what you need to do is prepare the ground and put these seeds in at a depth of 1.5 centimetres, around about 15 millimetres, cover them with a bit of compost and then water them. Now, these seeds are quite small. It can be difficult to space them exactly where you want them, but I wouldn't worry too much, because even if you plant them really close together, they still will produce radishes that you can pull up in clumps. And once you've planted them, particularly in June, you'll see germination within 7 to 14 days. Now, there's loads of varieties of radish available, such as French breakfast, such as Scarlet Glow, but I also like trying new varieties, and this is a variety I've not tried before called Sparkler 3. So I'll be sowing some of these in June. I'll let you know how I get on with them. If you want a regular supply of radish, you should be sowing these round about every 3 weeks. But radish are an excellent vegetable to sow in June. Now, in my opinion, a really underrated and versatile vegetable that can be sown in June is turnips. There's so many possible ways you can use turnips, and the good news is they're really easy to grow. So they're great for roast dinners, they're great for stews and casseroles and all sorts of other things. So if you've not grown turnips before, it's well worth giving them a try. Now, in the past I've grown a variety called Purple Top Milan, which are absolutely fantastic. But this year I thought I'd try something slightly different, and this is a variety of turnips called Snowball. Now, these should be sown directly outdoors because in my experience I've found that these don't transplant very well if you were to start them indoors in cell trays. So I'm going to sow mine directly into this raised bed here behind me in rows around about 30 centimetres or 12 inches apart. So these seeds are very small and they won't need to be sown very deep at all. So I'll sprinkle them into the row and just put a very fine covering of compost on top and then give them a good water. Turnips do like a good amount of watering, and when it gets to the month of June, when it gets a lot warmer, they will need to be watered regularly. Now, these seeds should germinate in 14 to 21 days. But just a word of caution that once they germinate, these will need protecting. So once I've sown the seeds in my raised bed here, immediately I'm going to net them over. Because birds, particularly pigeons, will like the leaves of turnips, and once they start to nip away at them, they start to get destroyed really quickly. So when you do plant turnips, it's best to protect them immediately, particularly outdoors. Now, for my next suggestion, I'm going to move away slightly from something I said at the beginning of the video in making brand new suggestions for this video compared to the one I did in May. And that's because very closely linked to turnips is another vegetable that I really love, and I mentioned in a lot of videos, is swede or rutabaga. And that's something else that's well worth sowing in June. This is that variety that I recommended in the May video, and that's a variety called Helena, and they're sown in very much the same way as you would for turnips, and exactly the same level of protection is needed once you sow the seeds. I'd probably suggest that this is one of my favourite vegetables, which is why I'm featuring it again, because I really want to try and encourage you to grow swedes or rutabaga if you've never done that before. Particularly this variety as well, Helena, it produces fantastic, really well-sized swedes that are such wonderfully flavoured. It's well worth growing these. Now, swedes do take up a little bit of space, so I'm not going to get too many swedes in my raised bed here because my turnips will be in there as well. But it's well worth me growing 8 to 10 of these, and if you've got more space, just grow as many as you want. When they're large enough and they need to be thinned out, you'll need to thin them out in rows of 45 centimetres or 18 inches apart, and then round about 25 centimetres or 10 inches between each plant, because the leaves grow quite large on these, so they will need a little bit of space. So just be prepared for that. If you are growing speed, don't underestimate the amount of space you need. So I'd definitely suggest that swede or rutabaga is another vegetable that you sow in June. Now, when it comes to June, for a lot of varieties of brassicas, it can be a little late to start planting them as seeds. But there are one or two varieties that you can grow. Now, a lot of cabbage varieties need to be sown earlier, but there is a variety of cabbage that I'm going to suggest that you can sow in June, and that is January King 3. Now, this variety can be sown indoors from March through to May, and as you can see, I've got one or two here ready that we're ready to transplant straight outside. But you can sow these directly outside in June. Now, one thing I like about this particular variety, January King, it's one that will grow and survive all the way through the winter, and you can harvest this right the way into January and February of the following year. So it's a great variety to grow for a continuous supply of cabbage. Now, when you are sowing these directly outside, like most seeds, it's really important that you prepare the ground correctly before you sow your seeds. These are quite small seeds. Brassica seeds are like very, very tiny beads, and they're very hard to pick up individually. So what I'll do is I'll make a couple of drills or rows in my vegetable bed, and then what I'll do is put the seeds between my fingers and sprinkle them into the drill. I'll make the rows about 15 centimetres or 150 millimetres or 6 inches apart, and then plant the seeds at round about 1.5 centimetres or 15 millimetres, cover them with a fine covering of compost, and then give them a good watering. And just like I've mentioned for the swedes and the turnips, I'll also protect these right from the moment I put them in the ground, because when they emerge, if you don't protect them, they will be attacked. So I'll put netting over these immediately. When the seedlings germinate and they get to a height of 10 to 15 centimetres, 4 to 6 inches high, I'll then thin them out and transplant them into their final positions. And because brassicas take up a little bit of space, that will mean that the final positions will need to be around about 60 centimetres or 24 inches between plants. But definitely January King 3 is a great variety of cabbage to sow in June. Now I find it so difficult doing any of these monthly veg seed sowing videos without mentioning lettuce. I almost feel like a lettuce addict, and that's because lettuce is so easy to grow. It's such a wonderful vegetable and there's so many varieties available. So of course in June I have to also suggest lettuce as something that you should sow in your vegetable garden. Now lettuce is a really versatile vegetable in the way that you can grow it. You can grow it outdoors in raised beds or directly into the ground. It can be grown in a greenhouse or a polytunnel. It's just one of those vegetables that just seems to adapt to all types of environments. Now as you can see in my raised bed here, I've already got some lettuce growing that I sowed earlier. And there's two varieties here, a little gem at the front here, and also I've got Lola Rossa here. I've also got some rockets growing here, and as you can see I've already got another cell tray ready with lettuce that's ready to go directly into the raised bed. And the idea of sowing lettuce, particularly during the summer months when you use it particularly for things like salads, is you want a regular supply. And just to demonstrate how much I like lettuce, just look how many varieties I've got that I grow. We have varieties here such as Lakeland, which is my particular favourite, but also things like Iceberg, Webb's Wonderful, Lola Rossa. And I also like growing Rocket as well, which is a lettuce leaf, but it has a slightly different peppery type of flavour and adds something different to your meals. And as I've already mentioned, I've already got a variety of that growing here. So in June you can sow lettuce seeds directly outdoors and thin them out when they get large enough, or you can continue to do what I do and sow them indoors, get them to around about this size over here and then transplant them straight into the ground. It really much depends upon what space you've got available to grow indoors or outdoors. And just like I mentioned a little bit earlier for radishes, if you want a continuous supply of lettuce throughout the summer and into early autumn, you need to be sowing these round about every 3 weeks in the volume or amounts that you want. Only sow as many as you need, because you get hundreds and hundreds of seeds in each packet and you just want to make sure you don't grow a glut of lettuce that you might not use. So I always grow in small amounts in regular periods. But lettuce is a fantastic vegetable to sow in June. Now my next two suggestions are linked quite closely to lettuce but provide something slightly different. The first one is a mustard leaf called mizuma. This is a variety called Wado. Now this is a suggestion that I made right at the end of the May video, but the wonderful thing about growing mizuma, it does provide a really mustard type of taste to your stir fries, to your salads, so it does give you something different and it's well worth doing. It grows very much in the same way as lettuce, where you'll sow these at around about 2.5 centimetres, 1 inch deep, cover them with compost and water, and then when they get large enough, thin them out to around about 12 inches or 30 centimetres, 300 millimetres apart. Now these are one of those fantastic varieties that you can cut and they'll grow back. They're called cut and come again crops, so you'll just cut a few leaves off and they'll continue to supply you for a long period of time. So mizuna is also fantastic to sow in June, as are my next suggestion, which is Chinese cabbage. This is not really grown extensively in the UK, but again another vegetable that's really easy to grow and can be sown directly outside from May to August in the UK. These are sown in exactly the same way as the mizuma, around about 1.5 centimetres deep, and allow 30 centimetres or 12 inches between plants. So if you've never tried growing Chinese cabbage before as an experiment, then why not give this a try? This is a variety called Kiseki F1. Now at the time of filming this video we're still in the month of May, and a few days ago I planted a few rows of my next suggestion for planting in June, and that is carrots. In this bed here, in this raised bed, I've got 2 rows of carrots, and a fantastic variety that I always suggest is a variety called Autumn King 2. Now carrots are always best sown directly into the ground, and if you have one, a raised bed is a perfect location for sowing carrots because of its raised sides. That helps to reduce the possibility of carrot root fly. But if you haven't got a raised bed, you can still plant these directly into the ground, or if you've got even limited space, you can grow them in pots and containers. Now these haven't germinated yet, they'll take about 14 to 21 days, and when we get to the month of June, the temperature will allow these to germinate quite quickly. Now you want to plant these at around about 1.5 centimetres deep or 15 millimetres in short drills. But a good tip is before you sow the seeds is to wet the compost first and then put the seeds in, then cover them with compost and give them another little bit of water on top. And that way the ground or the compost is completely saturated when the seeds are in there. There is quite a lot of debate about whether or not you should thin carrots out or not. Now the seeds are quite light and small, and you can sow them reasonably well spaced if you have the patience to do so. If seeds fall together and they grow together, that's okay as well, because if you don't thin them out, it means that you might get slightly smaller carrots, but if you leave them in long enough, they'll be absolutely fine. The theory is by trying to lift them, you're increasing the possibility of carrot root fly, because by lifting them, it increases the smell of the carrots and that attracts the carrot root fly. That's the theory. I tend to not thin them out anymore, and if you do want to thin them out, what you want to do is get a small garden fork just underneath and gently lift, separate any carrots out that you want and then replant them. That's if you want to do that. I just tend to leave them in and harvest them in little tiny clusters or bunches when they're ready. But carrots are definitely a great vegetable to continue sowing in the month of June, and Autumn King 2 is a really good variety to try if you've never grown them before. And my final suggestion for this video is another summer staple that's so easy to grow and absolutely delicious, and that is spring or summer onions. Just like the lettuce, we like a regular supply of these all the way through the summer, and these will be sown every 3 weeks. My favoured variety is this variety here. It's a variety called Ramrod, and this really is a fabulous variety. It produces really good, strong spring onions. And this variety has never failed for me. You may use varieties like White Lisbon, which is a really popular variety of spring onions, and that's absolutely fine. But if I was to choose between the two, definitely Ramrod would be my choice. Now, spring onions can be sown directly outdoors anytime really from March through to July. Like a lot of small seeds, they'll be sown at around about 1.5 centimetres, 15 millimetres deep, and then given a good watering. Now when you've sown these seeds, you'll normally start to see them germinate in around about 14 to 21 days, particularly when it starts to get warmer in the month of June. And as I've mentioned, if you want a regular supply, you want to be sowing these round about every 3 weeks in the amount you want, just like your lettuce. So spring or salad onions are my final suggestion for this video for seeds that you can sow in June. Well, I hope you found the 10 suggestions that I've made for vegetable seeds that you can sow in June helpful, and it's given you 1 or 2 ideas. But bear in mind, as I said at the beginning of the video, it is just 10 out of many vegetables that you could potentially sow during the month of June. If you want to take a look at the video I produced for vegetable seeds that you can sow in May, that will also include seeds that you can sow in June. So that'll give you an even wider choice. And as mentioned at the beginning of the video, if you want a completely free copy of my 2023 vegetable sowing and planting calendar, all you need to do is send me a quick email, and I'll put my email address in the video description below, and I'll send you one by return email. I'd also really love to know any suggestions that you have for vegetables or even varieties that you're growing that I haven't covered in the video. Maybe you could suggest 1 or 2 varieties for me to try later this year or even next year. If you have got any suggestions, please put them in the comments below this video, and that'll also allow other growers to see your suggestions, which will be fantastic. And I really hope you've enjoyed the video, and if you did, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. And if you do want to subscribe to the channel for future videos on how to sow and grow fruit, vegetables and flowers, and 1 or 2 recipe ideas, don't forget to press the subscribe button. And I'll see you all on the next video.